S.Africa Business News, proudly sponsored by EY.
Africa, it is huge, it is diverse, and its business landscape fascinating and dynamic. And that's our business here on your favorite weekly African business stop in Nairobi. Bonitunya brings us the latest from Nairobi. Esther Aoni is in Lagos, and Christine Mundwa joins us later here in Johannesburg. And my name is Victor Homoiswana. This is the Africa Business News. Mambo Boni, I'm not surprised to see that China is now the biggest lender to Kenya with over $1 billion in debt. What exactly was this money borrowed to accomplish?
Well, yes, Victor, China has indeed toppled Japan from being Kenya's largest bilateral lender and further entangling the country's economy with that of the Asian dragon, as it were. But Victor, according to the National Treasury, Kenya owes just about $1.1 billion US dollars. This is just about 100 billion Kenyan shillings to China, and nearly a third of which was staked up for over first half of the government's current fiscal year. Now, the debt stood at just about, $0.85 billion, or just about 82.8 billion shillings at the end of June last year. So you can see that sort of growth. And to answer your question, the bulk of this money is going for big money infrastructure projects and an expansionist policy that we've seen Kenya gotten into majorly in roads, railway, ports, and more recently, the geothermal generation. Now, Victor, Kenya seems to have finally found a trading partner that works for it. You see, Kenya's debts to Japan more than halved over the last 6 months to just about $0.4 billion, or just about 36 billion shillings as of December 31st from $0.9 billion in June, a 55% decline, and obviously on account of the conditionalities that have been relaxed in regards to trading with China. And so the China debt pile is associated with ongoing infrastructure project, as I mentioned earlier, Victor, for which China pegs the funding of the contracts being awarded to most of its companies in Kenya. And in December, Victor, for instance, China's Exim Bank released its initial tranche of funding for the standard gauge railway, which explains the surge in Chinese debt. Now, the bank will finance the project to the tune of 85%, with the Kenyan government bridging the remainder through levies and budgetary allocations.
And a number of Kenyan cabinet secretaries have voluntarily stepped aside while being investigated for corruption. What are the details there?
Well, Victor, that has to be the biggest story east of Africa, and especially it was unfolding at the weekend. And yes, a number of Kenyan cabinet secretaries have voluntarily stepped aside while being investigated for corruption in regards to what we've seen in the government and what was ailing the President Uhuru Kenyatta's government. And this has certainly caused quite some interest and excitement. As you might expect now, 5 cabinet ministers have effectively resigned from President Uhuru Kenyatta's cabinet on Saturday, following his demand that they must quit after the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission placed them on the list of senior officials under investigations. Victor, what is interesting is that the 5 Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries Cabinet Secretary Felix Koskei, his energy counterpart Davis Chirchir, Transport CS Engineer Michael Kamau, who obviously has been in the news for a lot of work happening in his ministry, Labour Cabinet Secretary Kazungu Kambi, and Lands CS Charity Ngilu made history by voluntarily stepping aside. Now, here's what is important, is that they are not resigning. They're just stepping aside for 60 days, after which the law enforcement agencies whose mandate is to investigate them must do and conclude the investigations, upon which they'll be declared ready for either prosecution or acquittal. So really, they're hanging on the balance, but it has obviously sent a very strong message coming from the president's administration that indeed he's serious about tackling graft.
President Uhuru Kenyatta cracking the whip there. Finally, it has been a while since the Rwanda Development Board made it possible for people wanting to register businesses to do that online and not have to make several trips to Kigali. Now it is the Standards Agency that has decided to follow suit.
Victor, you see, Rwanda has for a long time been the poster child for all things positive and all things possible in regards to merging the economy and ICT. And this was definitely quite a step for them and a first for Rwanda's government. And the excitement and the inclination towards information and communications technology is increasing. Now, individual firms seeking to services from Rwanda Standards Board will no longer be required to make multiple trips to the agency's offices. Actually, they don't require to be there physically, following the launch of an information portal that allows the public to access the services online. The portal, developed with the support of Trademark S.Africa, that has been doing a lot of work in terms of integration in the region, seeks to reduce time taken to disseminate information, as well as different operations such as standard development processes and applications for certifications, testing and whatnot. And obviously this will push Rwanda even higher in their ease of doing business index coming later on in the year.
Things keep on looking better for the ease of doing business in the East African region. Thank you very much, Bonnie Tunya from Nairobi in Kenya. Up next is Southern Africa. We're still on Africa Business News, and Christine Mundo is with me in studio. The drama surrounding Eskom continues, especially the return of power outages this past week, as the boardroom dancing kept on churning more drama. I wonder if you observed the Earth Hour on Saturday. We also get to talk about a bit of what's happening in Zambia later on. But first, the 1 billion rand or $82 million set aside for the development of black industrialists. Christine, were you at the summit organized by the Department of Trade and Industry, and what do you think of the initiative?
I certainly was, and I'll tell you that, when I spoke to Deputy Minister Masina, he actually went as far as saying more billions are to come with regards to this program, and that government was simply just consolidating these figures. Of course, through the country's development finance institutions, black industrialists, provided that they have full ownership of their businesses and solid business plans that could potentially create jobs, will be able to access grants and loans. I mean, some of those loans will come with an interest rate of as little as 1%. I think it's a great initiative, and of course the emphasis is on ownership. But I heard some strong language coming out of that summit. I mean, the Deputy Minister, among other delegates, the President himself, of course, reiterating the fact that if you look at the country's stock exchange, black people only account for 3% of that. Take a look at, for instance, the construction sector, where you've got the 5 big firms owning 80% of the market share. So there are a lot of places where black business simply hasn't been able to penetrate, and the government says that those are the areas that they're targeting, especially manufacturing. Of course, not outside of the law, but they're certainly going to target those specific industries.
Much talked about BEE, but very little progress there, it seems. I also read a story about Zambia and the mining royalties that just won't go away. It's been going on for close to a decade now.
Yeah, certainly. But I think more recently the problem is, and we spoke about this a while ago when Edgar Lungu had just come in, the fact that there was this regulation within the mining industry that companies were up in arms about. Right. Essentially, the new tax regime basically takes tax from 6 to 20% in one instance, from 6 to 8 in another. And the industry simply says, take us back to the original 2-tier system. But now President Edgar Lungu has commissioned the Minister of Mines and the Minister of Finance to go back and have a look at this regime and possibly bring back recommendations to Cabinet, and they have a deadline of April the 8th. But we know about deadlines in Zambia, don't we?
Well, he's not even in country as I speak. He was in China, I was there last week. Thank you very much, Christine Mundo, joining us here in Johannesburg. Up next in Lagos, Nigeria, is Esther Awoniyi, who's going to tell us about what's happening in that part of the world. Esther, after a fairly successful election held this weekend, over 50 million votes or so counted, what conclusions can we come to at this point?
Well, it's been very, very interesting elections. We've seen a very fascinating build-up to the elections. Like you said, over 50 million, but this year's turnout obviously was very large, very positive. The international observer missions that have been in the country have said that they're very impressed with the turnout. They're very impressed with the process they saw on ground, talking about transparency, the fact that INEC appeared to have been quite ready for the election. So, and if we're going to see well, obviously, they're both civilian presidents. We'll be seeing one civilian president handing over to another civilian president. So it's been positive all the way.
It will also be remiss of me not to mention the announcement of the 1,000 startup enterprises winners announced by the Tony Elumelu Foundation. I actually saw Tony Elumelu on TV cast his vote in the weekend's election. These enterprises selected from what, 20,000 or so applications from about 52 countries, but there are no prizes for guessing the top countries from which the chosen 1,000 came from. Esther?
Now, 1,000 African entrepreneurs representing 52 African countries and territories were decided upon by the TEEP Selection Committee, comprised of some of Africa's distinguished industry captains and leading entrepreneurs. Now, Paraminda Ver, OBE Director of Entrepreneurship at the Tony Elumelu Foundation, said the high quality and quantity and quality of applicants is a testament to the brilliant ideas and incredible talent that exists in abundance across Africa.
Well, that leads us to this week's trivia to test your knowledge of Africa, and we also put Esther and Bonnie on the spot to pick their favorite stocks of the week from their respective regions. Stay with Africa Business News. Time for Stock Pick, where I ask Esther and Bonnie to tell me if I were to invest $10,000 in a stock in their region, which share would they recommend I should buy and why? Let's start with you, Bonnie.
Victor, my stock pick for this week will definitely be Safaricom. We've seen record numbers from this company just this week, and obviously from an investor's point of view, this is where to put your money. We're talking about a market capitalization of 700 billion shillings. We've not seen this in corporate Kenya, as well as their share price hitting 1750. When we had 1350, everyone made a lot of noise and thought this is the highest it could go. Now analysts are pointing to a figure of 19 or 2150, who knows? So obviously, if you have money, this is where you need to put it if you hope for it to grow someday.
Mobile telephony is still on the radar as far as Bonnie is concerned in East Africa. How about you, Bonnie, Esther, in West Africa?
Well, I think I'm going to go with Guarantee Trust Bank from the banking sector. The bank posted very impressive 2014 full-year numbers. We saw very strong income growth, very strong non-interest income growth, and the bank has been able to manage its non-performing loans compared to other banks in its category. So going forward, this is a bank I think investors should stay with. Well, I'll be staying with the bank, so I think it's a good recommendation.
Banks and mobile telephony seem to dominate. In our trivia this week, I asked the team a question related to the 1,000 entrepreneurs selected by the Tony Elumelu Foundation to receive their share of the $100 million set aside. For the next 10 years, the man Tony Elumelu was not always a philanthropist, at least not on the scale he is now. What was his last job before he founded his current company, Heirs Holdings and the Tony Elumelu Foundation?
Well, Victor, who can forget UBA's red colors? Yes, United Bank of Africa.
Excellent. Thank you, Bonnie. An economist by training, Elumelu is the chairman of Heirs Holdings and the Nigerian bank he built, UBA, until what it is today, the United Bank for Africa. You and I know it mainly as the UBA, listed in 2011 by the New African magazine among the 100 most influential Africans, and by Forbes magazine in 2012 as one of the 20 most powerful people in Africa. Elumelu turned Standard Trust Bank into a top 5 bank in Nigeria when he led the largest merger in the banking sector in sub-Saharan Africa to acquire UBA in 2005. Today, this Pan-African institution has more than 7 million customers in 19 African countries. We're back with you next week with more Africa Business News. We thank Esther Aoni out of Lagos, Nigeria, where hopefully they'll have a new president next week. Bonnie Tunya in Nairobi, earlier Kenya, and earlier on Christine Mundo here in Johannesburg. Stay tuned to CNBC Africa. Until next week, adios.